Are you a fan of Final Fantasy or any other JRPG out there? Then this might be for you. Fabula Ultima touts itself as being a JRPG inspired game, but does it really live up to its own ambition? This is a review of Fabula Ultima. Let's dive in. And so here we have Fabula Ultima, the TTJRPG. Let's take a look at the back. Now this was published by Need Games and Rooster Games in 2023 and written by Emmanuel Galero. I believe this is his pet project, as I've read at the very beginning of this book. But let's see what we have. This is your world. This is your story. Make your choice and fight for what you believe in. Fabula Ultima is a tabletop role-playing game inspired by Japanese-style console RPGs or JRPGs. In Fabula Ultima, you and your friends will tell epic stories of would-be heroes and fearsome villains. Set in fantasy worlds brimming with magic, wondrous locations, and uniquely bizarre monsters. Create your own setting together, a simple and intuitive rule set, a bestiary filled with monsters, demons, beasts, and more, 15 classes to mix and match, and everything the Game Master needs to run this game. And also 360 full color pages. With a free PDF version included. That's always a bonus in this day and age. And I would like to say that this book came with a little cover, and so you get like a black and white version underneath. I don't know why this isn't colored, but okay. I mean, I'm all for the flap. Actually, I'm not really all for the flap. I would have much preferred this without the flap, but hey, it does protect the book a little bit. So let's pop this guy open and see what there is to be seen. So this book contains 5 chapters. An introduction is of course going to be at the very beginning, and I actually really like this introduction, as we'll see here in a little bit. There's the biggest section by far is the game rules, and that's just because of how much material there is. There's a lot of rules in this chapter alone. Then we get the character creation chapter and some information for the Game Master, and then to kick things off, the bestiary. So I really do like this introduction because not just because it tells you like what a role-playing game is and what the basics are, which, I mean, it just really kind of reiterates what this game is about. It actually gives you some ideas, or at least that's what I got out of it. So you have these your world could be sections, and there's a few of them. Like this one describes high fantasy and what the principles of the high fantasy settings usually are. You have natural fantasy, tech and techno fantasy, and I actually really do enjoy those 3 different flavors, and you can obviously tell that there's going to be some sort of support for some of these settings in the future. And actually at the time of this review there's already one, but I can't remember exactly what it is. It's on DriveThruRPG if you want to take a look. Just search Fabula Ultima and you'll come across it quite quickly. But aside from that, you do get, you know, your typical what is a role-playing game and what you need to play this game and what its core pillars are. So for now, let's go ahead and check out how to create a character. I should point out before I get into character creation that a lot of the pre-play steps are going to be done with the GM. This will usually be your session 0 type stuff, but this is going to also include world creation, where you'll plot out important features on a map, the kingdoms and whatnot, but you'll also describe some important historical events and some threats that your players are going to be going up against. There are a few tables to look through if you are the other players, find yourselves lacking any ideas, but usually you're going to come through with some sort of a plan in mind and your players will feed off of that. You'll also go through a group creation, and in this step you figure out what brought the PCs together, whether it's a specific trope, such as one PC being the most important one and then all the others protecting that one, or you're all part of some sort of a resistance. And then we finally get into character creation. I would say that character creation in Fabula Ultima is a solid medium complexity. The most complicated aspects being able to choose up to 3 classes to start with, and then figuring out what plays well with the others. The book does a well enough job in making the information flow in a coherent and methodical way. Now, remember that because we'll be getting into that a little bit later. And there are 7 steps in the whole process. So you're going to create your character's identity, which is a short sentence that briefly summarizes how they see themselves at the moment. Then you'll choose or create the character's theme, which is a strong, ideal emotion or feeling that dominates your character's action. You'll choose their origin, which is the place they come from. You'll choose 2 or 3 classes and distribute your initial 5 levels amongst them. You actually start with 5 levels because with each level you get a skill in one of those classes. Then you're going to determine the die size of your character's 4 attribute scores, which are dexterity, insight, might, and willpower. And then you'll calculate HP, MP, IP, DMD, and your initiative modifier. Then you're going to get a starting budget of 500 zenith to purchase equipment. And then any leftovers you have from that, you'll add that to a roll of 2d6 times 10 to determine what your initial savings are, or how much money you start with the game. And a lot of these steps are really short. There's a couple tables that you can roll or choose from if you find yourself getting stuck. But I think the main crux of this chapter is definitely going to be the character classes. And if you get stuck trying to combine some classes together, there are some classic characters that you can just use as a starting template and then go from there. For example, the gunslinger uses the sharpshooter and then the tinkerer classes. The healer has 2 levels of orator and 3 levels in the spiritist. So if you find something that you know that you want to play as a ninja, then you can just go ahead and take a look at those relevant stats and off to the races you go, I suppose. There are 15 different classes, which, I mean, since you're going to be combining all classes, that's actually a benefit. And each of the classes will give you some questions to help flesh out your background, a free benefit or benefits, and then 5 different skills. And some of these skills are ranked. So if they have the little plus sign next to it with a number, that's how many ranks you can pour into that skill. So the classes that we actually have to choose from include the Arcanist, who can summon magical avatars of ancient godlike entities, the Chimerist, who can learn spells from creatures and speak with beasts. Then we have the Darkblade, which can unleash dark attacks and draw power from bonds. We have the Elementalist, who can wield the destructive power of the elements. The Entropist, who can channel the dark energy of the cosmos. The Fury, who can provoke enemies and hit harder when damaged. The Guardian, who can protect your allies and fight clad in heavy armor. The Lore Master, who is a master of knowledge and support for allies. The Orator, who uses their words to gain allies and influence conflicts. The Rogue, who can seize opportunities and steal unique items from enemies. The Sharpshooter, who excels at ranged combat and negates ranged attacks. The Spiritist, who supports your allies with magic and casts light spells. The Tinkerer, who can craft inventions and use inventory points in new ways. The Wayfarer, who is a master explorer and joins forces with a loyal companion. And then the Weapon Master, who excels at melee combat and can counter melee attacks. Each of these different classes give you some questions at the top to help flesh out your background, and they also give you some free benefits. In addition to that, there are 5 different skills for each class. Some of them are ranked, so if they have that plus sign with the number, that means you can pour some levels into that skill. And every time you gain a level, you gain a skill point to buy something or rank something up. Some of them do have additional rules, mainly your spellcasters. So if you do like an elementalist, then you'll have some spells that you can choose from as well if you get the elemental magic skill. So be aware of that when you're choosing your skill. Now, my first major complaint with this book is how it is structured. So after we create our character, we go back to talking about prologues and how the PCs met. And this would have been better served if it was next to the group creation section or vice versa. There are some optional rules later in the chapter and information on experience and leveling up. These things are usually reserved for the GM, but I kind of actually like it in this chapter, specifically experience levels and leveling up, because that's actually relevant. But not everything is going to be relevant in the chapters, as we'll see here a little bit later. For now, let's take a look on how to play the game. This, like pretty much any TTRPG out there, is a if you don't like it, then throw it away type of a game. There are lots of rules, and if you don't like a specific one, then throw it away or change it to your liking. But how do you actually play the game? This one is kind of unique. It's like a 2D20 system from Modiphius, but not really. There are 4 attributes: dexterity, insight, might, and willpower. Whenever you're asked to make a roll, you might have something like this: might plus willpower, or even dexterity plus dexterity. So a D4 all the way up to a D12. So you're going to roll 2 different dice, and they may be different sizes. You're going to add the total up and then compare it to a target number. There are no skills here, so it's up to the players and the GM to work together in determining which attributes to roll for a test. And I will say there are some frequently used checks on page 51, so I am thankful that they give you a starting guide for these sorts of things. Crits and fumbles are a thing, so whenever you roll doubles that are higher than a 6, you get a critical success, which gives you the added benefit of an extra effect called an opportunity. Fumbles are for when you roll a 1 on both dice. You do get 1 Fabula point if you fumble though, so fumble away. Combat follows these same guidelines. You start with a group initiative check. This is where things kind of get awkward. You elect a leader, just like you would in a normal group check, and everyone else can be a supporter. A supporter rolls their own check in order to give the leader a bonus to their roll. The leader rolls with their initiative modifier and any bonuses from supporters and compares that to the initiative number on the monster stat block. If the leader wins, someone on the PC side gets to go first. If not, a monster goes first. By the way, this is one of those games where turns alternate between PCs and NPCs, regardless of initiative, I guess. In order to attack, roll the 2 attributes as described on the item or spell and compare to the target's defense score. Let's talk about defense for a moment. So, a monster's defense score is either going to be a static number or it will be listed as a bonus, which you will need to add to their dexterity die size. Magic defense will always be listed as a bonus. Why can't we just have one or the other? It also took me way longer to find that information than I'd care to admit. Like, it's actually at the very beginning of the chapter under where it says defenses, where you're reading about the different stats on the monster stat block. Yeah. Fabula and Ultima points are the last rules I'll be talking about, even though there are numerous more in this book. Fabula points are for players and Ultima points are for the GM. You can gain Fabula points in a variety of different ways, such as fumbling or whenever a villain makes an entrance during a scene. You can use Fabula points in order to alter the story or invoke a bond or invoke a trait, which allows you to reroll dice during a check, or using a skill that requires a Fabula point. Likewise, the GM has Ultima points that the GM can use to recruit some backup for the NPCs, or even to have the villain escape or recover. As I've mentioned before, there are a lot of rules in this chapter alone, and there doesn't really seem to be a lot of organizational thought behind most of it. It just goes from one point to the next point to the next point. And I think that definitely makes it a hard read for sure. It also seems like there was just a collection of ideas that were thrown into a melting pot of a game, but I also have to remember this is a if you don't like it, then throw it away type of a game. So for now, let's go ahead and take a look and see what there is for the GM. I will be upfront and say that I think there is some information in the previous chapters that would have been better served here. The players do not need to know everything that goes on behind the scene. Take clocks as an example. Players don't need to know all the intricate rules for how clocks are used in the game. That is something better reserved for the GM as a tool to use, not as a game rule. This chapter is about advice on how to run things, and there's advice on running games with the character classes in mind, or even how to write a villain, the mechanics of which are actually explained in the game rules chapter, by the way. and how to run a dungeon, which kind of seems more like an afterthought, which is quite a shame because dungeons, or at least in all of the JRPGs that I've ever played, are a major staple of those games. There is quite a big section on designing rare items, which is really cool, and there are actually a lot of samples for these rare items. These include weapons, armor, shields, accessories, those types of things. So it's really cool that they give you like an extension of the gear section here. NPCs and creatures get a hefty amount of depth here, specifically in how to create battles. You can start with a simple template in the form of a creature stat block and then turn them into elites or even champions. This was very well thought out, and I actually like this inclusion. It keeps things fresh, so you're not always running the same monsters every time. Variety is good in a game like this. The last chapter includes a bestiary, which are separated into 8 different species. You have beasts, constructs, demons, elementals, humanoids, monsters, plants, and undead. And I do actually like the fact that there's artwork for each of them. They're not pixel art like the items are in this game, but it is still quite cute and very on theme. Just make sure that you read the beginning of the chapter so that you know what each of the different values do, or even the different symbols do. And especially, definitely read up on defense, because, yeah, that's a thing. The art in this book is fantastic. It really gives the impression that this is something for JRPG fans. The icons for items are pixel art, which is a very neat touch. I really like that. But I'm also not a big fan of the layout of this book, particularly with the game rules chapter. It goes from one topic to the next, and it's really just an overload of game mechanics, some of which would have been better served in the game masters chapter as tools to use, that you could use. You don't have to use them, but they're there if you want them. The press start chapter is the only chapter, aside from the bestiary chapter, that I feel doesn't need a whole lot of tweaking. Just move the prologue section closer to the group creation section and we'll be fine. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really struggled to get through this book. Not because it doesn't have a lot to offer, it absolutely does. The section on game rules in the introduction chapter was an absolute joy to read, because it offers inspiration. It actually got my thinking juices flowing, and I was actually getting really excited to read what was in this book. The struggle for me was how the information overload seemed to spread throughout this book. It seems like a fairly light game on the surface, but there's a lot of little intricate things just tucked away in between the pages. The system is okay at best, which in my opinion could be a benefit, but it could also be a disadvantage. It's good if you are wanting to run something quick or something as an interlude between your main game. You can definitely run a quick campaign with this. Would I ever run this for my gaming group? Not really, but that's also because fantasy is not really my thing at the moment. If I were going to run it, I would definitely run it like a Dot Hack or a Sword Art Online Season 1 GOAT, where the players are trapped in this virtual world and they have to somehow get out. Also, I would definitely get rid of the no death for player characters thing. We're masochists here. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this review. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support this series, and I will see you guys in the next video.